My name is Tuck, and I'm honored to serve as the moderator for today's conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome you to all this important panel discussion on online gender-based violence, OGBV. So this discussion is particularly timely and relevant, as given how digital space have become central to our daily lives, given shaping how we communicate, advocate, work, etc. However, while the internet offers incredible opportunities, it has also become a space where discrimination, harassment, and violence often occurs. And OGBV is a growing crisis that often affects individuals worldwide, no matter who you are. But particularly, it disproportionately affects women, LGBTQ communities, and other marginalized communities. The OGBV can take many forms, including cyberstalking, harassment, doxing, etc. And it often leads to a lot of real-world consequences, impacting mental health, silencing voices, etc. And often, in some cases, it can even lead to physical harm. So, noting the harsh realities of online gender-based violence, it is my privilege to introduce our esteemed panelists. Joining us today are Nabila Nasir. Nabila Nasir, would you care to show your face? She's the partner director for KRYSS Network, which is also known as Online and Rights with Young People Through Safer Spaces. They have worked extensively on freedom of opinion, expression, digital safety, and also policy advocacy among youth. Next off, we have Amir, Capacity Building Officer. Hi, Amir. He is the Capacity Building Officer for Women's Aid Organization, WOW. They offer first-hand experience in supporting survivors of online abuse by providing them free crisis support and shelter. So each of our speakers bring a wealth of experience, and I look forward to an engaging discussion that not only highlights the challenges, but also explores tangible solutions. So first off, I would like to lay down a few ground rules to ensure a respectful and constructive dialogue. It's a bit long, but to sum it up, I would like everyone to just respect all voices, stay on topic, use respectful languages, be mindful of sensitive content. Last but not least, as the moderator, I may intervene to keep the discussion focused and inclusive. So just be nice, everyone. And so before we begin our panel discussion, I'd like to share a very short video that provides insight into one particular form of OGBV, doxing. And this video will illustrate how personal information can be weaponized to threaten and intimidate individuals, often forcing them into silence or fear. So as you watch, I encourage you to reflect on the broader implication of such actions and the urgent need of stronger protective measures. So without further ado, I will now share my screen and sound share. Everyone can see. All right, 3, 2, 1.
Makin lawa kau sekarang Siti Lip. Kau buat dekat aku. Kau tak layak. Aku dah lah tak tahu dia duduk mana. Habislah kau Siti. Lepas ni kau, nombor IC kau, nombor rumah kau, nombor plate kereta kau.
4. Padamkan akaun-akaun digital.
Memang susah nak hidup senang.
With that, let's begin the discussion. To start off the discussion, the conversation, I'd like to first pose our first question to Nabila. So this video, obviously highlights teases the potential risks and consequences of doxing. In your experience working in the digital advocacy among youth, how does doxing disproportionately impact women and marginalized groups online? And what are some of the real world consequences you have seen?
Hi, thank you, Tak. Hi, everyone. Sorry that my background is not the same as everybody else's. I'm connecting from my home in my tablet, so that we had a little bit of a technical issue. So yeah, just for everybody's information, what KRYSS Network does is that we research and document cases of online gender-based violence or technology-facilitated gender-based violence that are happening in Malaysia and also the wider region in Southeast Asia. The thing is that we still don't have such strong data, particularly on doxing, but it usually happens exactly as that video just showed everybody. Most of the perpetrators of our recorded cases are men who are seeking retribution on their partners that had broken up with them or dumped them. Most number of cases that we get are women being doxed by their previous partners or by their people who they have rejected before. Those are, I think we have currently about 250 cases of doxing that are recorded in 2023 and 2024, and 80% of that women affected by the people that they have rejected or used to be in a relationship with. Doxing is also not, how do I say this? It's not, a lot of people think that doxing doesn't affect people in real life, but it does. So most of the samples, meaning the people that we have interviewed and have given us their real life experience, says that they are not taken seriously by the authorities when they try to lodge a report with MCMC or with the police. The real life consequences are not taken into account. Most of the time, they are scared, always looking over their shoulders. Yeah, so the real life implications are pretty serious. We have women who have had to who have had to move from their place of residence, who have had to change jobs because they're constantly being harassed at home and at work as well. We have had cases where they go completely off grid, not just offline, but off grid completely. And they have had to seek psychological help. Those are just a few of the real life cases that we have. Does that answer your question, Jack?
Yes, beautifully. Thank you, Nabila. Right. Well, Nabila, you clearly raised an interesting point about like women not being taken or survivors of OGBV not being taken seriously. So, Amir, from your experience working in the protection of people facing abuse and online gender-based violence, etc., how does WA contribute to this area?
Thanks, Tak, and hello everyone. Thank you so much for how to say sharing your valuable time with us or learning about, I think, what seems to be a serious epidemic, not just in Malaysia but globally. So it's becoming a much more at the moment. So just a brief introduction about women's aid organization and how that and what do we do with regards to online gender-based violence. So we have been around since 1982. We began primarily as a service provider for domestic violence survivors, but we have evolved into providing those services for survivors of any kind of gender-based violence. So at the moment, we provide shelter services, case management, where our social workers will be helping survivors throughout the way in managing cases and incidents of gender-based violence. And lastly, we provide support and counseling services for them. And in relation to OGBV, we do handle such cases because our services are not just limited to cases of domestic violence, right? So in fact, just in 2024 alone, we performed case management for 96 cases where the gender-based violence has a tech element to it, where 84% of it morphed into stalking cases, or whether it's in the physical space or stalking in the virtual space. So in the sense that even in our own experiences, we are now seeing a much more increasing trend of receiving cases that are related to OGBV in Malaysia. Yeah.
Just a follow-up question, Amir. Like you mentioned, there was like 96 cases, 84% were resulting in stalking, and also the both in the digital space and also real life space. But has this form of OGBV translated to any real life violence, for example? I mean, without specifying the names, etc. Could you please elaborate on that?
So I think we can clarify the meaning of violence, right? So violence may not necessarily just be violence in its physical form. So any kind of action that causes harm is already violence. For example, how in fact, let's say the stalking incident creates fear, like in one of cases that Nabila shares, led the survivor seeking psychological help. So that's already a harm being done to the survivor. So when we talk about violence here, it's not just about physically harming the survivor. Yeah. So even causing psychological harm, that's also violence. Yeah.
Thank you, Amir. Then Nabila, actually, I would like to also follow up and bounce off with Amir. Amir mentioned about like stalking and doxing, etc. In your experience, right, can you elaborate on some of the more prevalent forms of OGBV that happens in today's society?
Oh wow, that's a it's a very difficult question just to answer in 1 minute probably, without taking too much of everybody's time if I can. So particularly in Malaysia, the top 5 of online gender-based violence that we see is cyber harassment, or also known as cyberbullying, doxing, non-consensual sharing of intimate images, so NCII. How many have I listed? I've listed 3, right? We also have, that's the top 3. What's the other 2 that I can remember off the top of my head? There is something called astroturfing, but that is specific to the gendered disinformation, which is affecting political candidates, specifically women political candidates. That's actually in the top 5. And we have just launched a new project, a research and documentation project on that. So gendered disinformation is another form that is very common, that is in the top 5, which is why we have launched a project on that. And then the 5th one, if I'm not mistaken, it is, let me just check my very quickly. Sorry, everybody. I don't want to share the wrong information, but let me very quickly check.
Thank you, Nabila.
Of course, no problem. I'm so sorry.
No, don't apologize. Sometimes, like we are experts in this field, you have a lot to actually absorb and digest. It's just sometimes you cannot remember. Like, but
Yeah.
well, in the meantime, where you're looking for your Nabila, just like slight follow up, lah, right? Actually, this is also like boils down to like I want you to also kind of explain to the audience what exactly makes it an OGBV, because like the thing you mentioned, cyberbullying, doxing, non-consensual sharing of intimate, like by pictures and etc. Those could be acts of violence, but what makes it a gender-based violence? What gives it that element?
So anything that is targeting women specifically, or disproportionately targeting women, or targeting that person's gender expression. So it might not necessarily be a woman that is being targeted. It could be a biologically male person who is female presenting, for example. So trans women, we see a very high very high percentage of cases of female presenting biologically male um, community members who are being targeted as well. Or another form that is quite common is that if a woman who wears the hijab, so that is part of her gender expression, right? But then there are exes sharing photos of them not wearing the hijab, for example. That is actually increasing. So any form of violence, like what Amir had mentioned earlier, any form of violence that happens to a woman or disproportionately affecting women or their gender expression, that may affect them physically, psychologically, economically, as well. I think economic violence is also not addressed, and there aren't a lot of data on.
Thank you, Nabila. Then I would like to actually follow up and bounce off to Amir. Amir, so clearly a lot of this online gender-based violence, when it happens, like cyberbullying, doxing, non-consensual sharing, etc., you have also noted like your organization is primarily giving like case management and also shelter, etc. But can you also elaborate on like the current landscape, like how what are the current policies that exist in Malaysia that addresses online gender-based violence, and where do you see the gaps in that protection? Does it totally not exist in terms of the policy, or is it only just up to the CSOs like wow to actually go and like ensure the protection of these survivors?
Thanks, Tak. So, all right. So the legal landscape, yeah. But if before I proceed to that point, I just also want to continue what Nabila shared earlier, right, concerning economic violence. So the thing is, we just want to also, how to say, dismiss the myth that violence can only be in a form of physical violence, right? Because what OGBV can also do is the disruption of the daily life of these particular survivors. Survivors have to move, change jobs. That's affecting that person's livelihoods. So and that's violence in the economic sense. And may I add, this may not be a case that O directly handled, but I'm just compelled to revisit the late Rajeswari Apahu's case. So this is a case where she was stalked, cyberbullied until it led to her death. So say we want to highlight here that the spectrum of the harm is not just it can also lead to death here. Yeah, so that's what I want to touch again. So concerning the legal landscape, right? So we have a few laws that is being used to deal with primarily, like for example, the laws that is always being used is of course the penal code. So the penal code has several provisions that may, for example, be used by the authorities to deal with gender-based violence, right? For example, hang on, yeah. So, like for example, Section 509 of the Penal Code. So, this specific section asserts that any person who insults the modesty of any woman by word, through sound, gesture, or exhibits any object intentionally, shall be punished for a term which may extend to 5 years or be fined or both. So how does it apply to OGBV? So maybe we can talk when we can see that how survivors of non-consensual dissemination of intimate images, for example, can be protected under this provision. So other than the penal code, we often see, for example, the usage of Communications and Multimedia Act being used to address cases of OGBV. For example, victims of online harassment and violence can be, like, for example, seek redress under Section 233 of the Communications and Multimedia Act. Or even the latest act that was passed by Parliament, Anti-Sexual Harassment Act 2022. So even this act itself covers sexual harassment that may happen in the virtual space. For example, dissemination of intimate images, cyber flashing, because it defines sexual harassment as any unwanted conduct of sexual nature in any form, whether verbal, non-verbal, visual, gestural, physical, directed at the person, which may reasonably be offensive to that person. So there are a number of such laws, but I think the main gap that we see or highlight from the experience of WO is always been, number one, how the lack of sensitization, you see, around these issues, primarily among the authorities. How, for example, we have experiences where WO dealt with authorities that may not fully understand the situation or the crime that is taking place, or may not be gender sensitized in addressing the rights and issues of the survivor. And of course, we also see problems with resources. For example, how we receive statements or reasonings by the authorities saying that, oh, we just don't have the resources or the tools to find the perpetrator of this OGBV. So that's just to share from WAO's perspective. Back to you, Tak. Does it answer the question? Yeah.
Yes, perfectly. Yes. So you mentioned two things. I mean, you mentioned a bunch of laws: the Penal Code, the Multimedia Communications Act, and also the Anti-Sexual Act 2022. And then you mentioned about how two things, which is one, authorities do not understand, they are gender sensitive to the issues of OGBV, and secondly, you mentioned how the government essentially refuse or you hide behind the guise of like, oh, we don't have resources and therefore we cannot solve the issue, etc. Wonderful insight. Nabila, would you like to add on to this?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I finally got my data, and the fifth number 5 of top 5 of online gender-based violence is impersonation. And yeah, I mean, a lot of, okay, so when I was on the panel by Astro Awani, we're talking about cyberbullying, over the tragic death when what was her name? I think, was it Rajeswari or Iswari, that had committed suicide, right? And so I was on the panel of that, and they were addressing the issue of cyberbullying. And a lot of the times they keep talking about, oh, we need stronger laws. Yeah, okay, so the law is only one section of the that addresses the issue, because we can have like 10,020 laws, but then as long as we don't focus on raising awareness and sensitization of the authorities, no amount of laws is going to help protect women. And we have to address the patriarchal culture as well, because even if we have the most fantastic laws in the world, if we don't address the issue of patriarchy in our culture, it's not going to go anywhere. We have had cases, so we have worked with WAO before, and we know plenty of cases that either we refer to them or they refer to us, where survivors go to MCMC or survivors go to police with concrete, and they have concrete evidence and they have concrete cases, but then MCMC just say, oh, this is not online gender-based violence, or it doesn't harm you, or this is just a civil case, you have to pursue a civil suit. And then police would be victim blaming, asking them like, oh, who asked you to share your images with your ex-boyfriend before? Or even if women who have not shared those images before, they keep saying like, oh, you must have done something to provoke the guy to want to do this to you. What did you do to the guy? Even though this woman has like, no, that guy is almost a stranger. I think there was a case where we have this one survivor who came to us and said her photo shared on a sex website by her former classmate, and then it's a fully clothed photo of her from her Instagram or Facebook or one of these platforms, and but her photo is being used on a sex website to share. This man, who is her former classmate, had shared a sexual fantasy about her, and it had been shared multiple times. And then still the police were saying, oh, you must have done something to provoke the guy, or you must have done something to, you dress too sexily, that's why the guy is like, that's why the guy desires you and end up doing this. And then after that, the case did not proceed, because the police said, oh, the guy has taken down the original post, and then refuses to see her evidence saying that, yeah, the original post has been taken down, but since then the post has been copied and put on other platform by other users, right? And that's not addressed at all. So I think apart from the law, we also need to talk about the sensitization of the people, but not just of the authorities, right? Also in schools, we have tried to talk to Ministry of Education, saying this is an issue that is prevalent. We need to be able to talk in schools, because a lot of times some of these perpetrators and the victims are underage girls, and also underage boys who are perpetrators to their classmates, for example, who are like 15, 16 years old. Some of them may not even know what they're doing is wrong, or people forgive them. And then they grow up to be men who do it again to their wives, girlfriends after school. So yeah, it's something that I think we need to think about larger than just the law.
That's actually kind of true. So you mentioned about, like, obviously in terms of the against the landscape of like all the legal stuff, etc. Like we see police are not taking women seriously, and there's the need for us to actually raise awareness. But a more simpler, like, let's just boil down to more simplest terms. How can each of us as individuals like contribute to combating OGBV? Because like Nabila, would you like to actually also elaborate on it, since KRYSS Network has released a wonderful OGBV toolkit? Perhaps you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. Sorry, I was muted. Sure. Thank you, Tak, for highlighting our toolkit. So we have a toolkit right now that is meant to educate the public on the types of OGBV, what OGBV is, the prevalence of OGBV, the laws that affect, and what we all can do. Our toolkit is available at our website, which is KRYSS.network. Maybe we can share it on the chat. The toolkit is available to be downloaded there for free, but we are also in the midst of updating the toolkit with the laws, the new laws that have come with the last year. We had some amendments to our laws, but also we are launching a microsite by mid-April or end April after Raya. And in through the microsite, we will be giving people like avenues or pathways of support if they or somebody that they know is going through online gender-based violence and would like to seek support. But I think as individuals, all of us, we can play a role in, like, if we see that if we see someone going through, we can give them support. We can let them know, look, there are avenues that you can seek, and the police does not have a right to say that to you, for example. So giving support, but also I think speaking up to some. I'm sure I know somebody who has doxed their ex-girlfriend. I know somebody who has shared an intimate image of their ex-boyfriend online, where that perpetrator is a woman. But yeah, and we can speak up against it, right? We don't have to stay silent. I think another thing that I lived outside of Malaysia for 17 years, and when I came back, I think one of the things that really frustrates me is that the inability for people to kind of call out another person, especially if the other person they feel is um, a person of authority or a person of higher status, or somebody that, or they say, oh, this is not my issue, this is not my problem, this is not my, so I shouldn't say anything. I think um, we have that kind of mindset as well, especially for things that we find taboo. So I think for me personally, I hope that people would be inclined to speak up. Just as what your background says, like, speak up and break the silence, no? Because that's what we need. We need more people speaking up for survivors. We need more people speaking up for the issues. And then once we have that, then we would have more resources. We have more reason to be able to do the work that we do.
Nabila. Now, Amir, actually also like to follow up on Nabila what she said, and in regards like give the need for each of us as individuals to give support, to voice out for both the survivors and also the issue. Does it also translate? Is it the same for people who are survivors who have experienced OGBV? Is it like this? Is it the same way to actually address OGBV? What else would you recommend them to do?
Meaning this advice we would counsel survivors, is it? So basically, at WAO, we believe in the principle of being survivor-centric. So meaning that we are led by the survivor all the way. But our role when we are sought for assistance is to advise them on all the available options that is available to the survivor. First thing foremost, believe the survivor. And then and it's never the survivor's fault. When these things happens, right? That is not the case. So and from that empowerment of the survivor, right, giving back that agency to her or to that particular person in deciding what are the next steps. So that's how the case management at WAO works. So in by providing that options for the survivor and counseling her what to do next. So let's say if the survivor feels that the first immediate attention is, for example, to seek medical attention, then that's where we shall go. If the next step is, for example, to seek counseling and psychological assistance, that's where we are going to be led by the survivor. So anything, it must be led by the survivor. I think the idea is that and also I want to concur with Nabila. So because we are in a society where fundamentally the problem is about that structure, that gender inequality and power imbalance that is inherent in the society. So I think when we want to approach the issue, of course there is multi-sectoral approach to it, right? Individual, societal, but I think a lot can be done by the individual themselves as well. And I totally agree. We need to be more courageous in challenging these things. And there is a concept we understand as rape culture, right? Where there is a belief that sexual violence is inevitable, where we apologize the perpetrator by making excuses for them. So I think and what contributes to that culture is we, how to say, take light or ignore all these small things, like for example making sexual jokes or sexist remarks. But these are the small things that would later contribute to the perpetration of a much more grave sexual violence or the phenomena of OGBV in the society. So that's basically the response to that question, Star.
Thank you. So to sum up what Amir just
Please
said,
correct me if I'm like swaying, swerving, so.
no, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. I actually mentioned to everyone that we actually need to be more survival centric, and thank you so much for the perspective, lah. So thank you so much to both our panelists for sharing such insightful perspectives. So I would like to actually now open the floor to the audience. So we would like to open up essentially a Q&A session for now. Before we begin, a quick reminder to keep the questions concise and relevant to the discussion. Please be respectful. And if your question is directed to a specific panelist, please do mention the name. So let's take our first question. So if you'd like to ask something, please, just show your screen and actually unmute yourself and just feel free to ask. So also briefly introduce yourself, where you're from, etc. So I see one person. Yes, Misha, right? But I can't really hear. I can't hear your voice. Muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Misha, everybody. Thank you for doing this. It's very interesting. I'm from the Netherlands, so it's very different from Malaysia, obviously, not just culturally wise, but also I think law-wise, it's very different. I was actually wondering, Amir, what are the main barriers people face like in contacting authorities or even loved ones in helping them combat this issue? So what are their are they afraid, or could you elaborate on that?
Oh, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so from the experiences that W had with the lived realities of our survival, I think fundamentally, number one, what makes them hard to, in fact, seek help would be number one is the idea of shame. So often survivors relate that when the not just OGBV happened to them, they felt that it is their fault, trying to rationalize as a cognitive strategy why it happened. So there's a lot of a stigma when it happens. So that's one of the key, how to say, reasons shared by survivors. So that's number one. Number two is this culture of victim blaming that would deter our survivors coming forward. Because, for example, we had survivors claiming that, if the authorities is like this, not trusting me, then there's no point of furthering the case. So we have such sharings by our survivors before. So that's from the collected experiences that we have at WO. So first is the shame, and secondly it's the victim blaming culture that prohibits them from going forward. While if I can touch even further, there's also an economic dimension to it. For example, so not just for OGBV, like even generally, let's say for domestic violence survivors, what is preventing them from moving forward? For example, there's a dependency on the perpetrator. There is also the issue about not wanting to affect the other family members within the households, like the children. So there's that dimension as well. But specifically for OGBV, there's a lot surrounding. There's a lot of shame surrounding it. Like for example, the fear. Let's say if I seek support, the perp might release this intimate images and it will never be the same again, because it's hard to take down those images, right? So that's, so I think for OGBV there's also that unique experiences attached to it. So yeah. Thanks so much, Michelle. Yeah, Nabila.
Yeah, I think those are, you've already pretty much covered it. It's the shame and the not being believed. Or there's also the ones where it's taken lightly, where like, yeah, this is a normal issue, but it's not that big a deal. It's not, just deal with it. It's not going to affect you in real life. That's the misconception, right? And it's taken lightly, but their fears are pretty much founded, because when they do go to the authorities, when they do go to their families, unfortunately, people do take them lightly, or even their own friends have said, oh, who asked you to take those kind of photos and post them online? It's your fault.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Right. Thank you, Misha. Is there anyone who would like to ask any questions? I see one question in the chat, but I mean, feel free to actually ask the question face to face. Hello, Cheryl. Yeah, you're muted. Just unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity for allowing us to ask, and also for the very insightful session. The question that I want to ask is a little bit complicated, because usually for these kinds of situation, it does get very complex. So if, for example, in situations where the online gender-based violence sort of also happens in real life, and there's like people who are aware about it, but are also really terrified in helping that certain person who's going through that gender-based violence, because they know that said person in real life, and they're afraid of that person hurting them. And yet that person have like went to the police to seek for help, have went to the schools to seek for help, but yet nobody hears them out. They aren't taken like seriously whatsoever. What is the advice that any of the panelists, if you're happy to answer, should what sort of advice would you give, is what I'm wondering.
If I may, sometimes in this situation you need an advocate. So I think that's the role of fortunately for a CSO specializing in providing services for OGBV. So meaning that there could be also situations where survivor may not know that there are also other available services out there, and I think linking up, referring that survivor to specialized CSOs may be able to refer her to all these other crucial services, that's number one. Number two, be an advocate for her. So that's like, for example, when we have survivors who agree to take up to proceed with that person's case with the social worker of WAO. So that's when WAO will be beside that person and advocate for the case. Like, so we understand that there's a lot of, let's say, in fact, that actually there's a good colleague of mine talking about fear of the authorities, which I concur. That's pretty much, let's say, a feeling that we have here, right? But at least when you have a friend, an advocate, an ally that could advocate for your case, be your advocate when it comes to meeting the authorities or accessing these services. So I think that could be one advice, I think, that comes at the top of my head. Any other suggestions, Nabila? What do you think? Or from Tuck yourself and members of MCCHR? Yeah.
Sorry, I'll jump in. So do reach out. There are avenues. Do reach out to CSOs like KRYSS, like WAO. I want to say reach out to your school counselor, but we have had situations where a young 16-year-old reached out to the school counselor, and then the school counselor breached her trust and betrayed her to her parents, and then there were issues. So and then everybody got involved, contacting us. So I want to say reach out to maybe an organization that they might trust. There are avenues online if they look. We are one of them. KRYSS Network is one of them. Even though we may not be able to provide the full end-to-end service, we may be able to, for example, give them a pathway to the support that they need. So whether it be potential lawyer to help them, or seeking OGBV friendly services, for example, a counselor or a psychiatrist or a psychologist who understands the issues, because we have also had cases where they sought a counselor that is not so understanding of OGBV or GBV cases, and also end up victim blaming, and that may be disheartening. I understand that, but not to give up and to constantly look for that advocate. We have had survivors who come to us and say not one single person in their friends group or in their family reported them, but then they found somebody through a forum who told the survivor to contact us through Instagram. So we got a message on Instagram and said, oh, they were told by somebody in a forum, and they have nowhere else to turn to. I guess it's to be, resilient, and unfortunately, and to look for different pathways that may not be the usual pathways of support.
Thank you, Nabila. Once again, you're sharing a lot of insights. I never knew even school counselors could actually also breach trust. Thank you so much. Which is kind of like scary lah. It's a scary sight to see in Malaysia. Anyone else have any other questions to follow up directed to either Nabila or Amir or both? Yeah, Misha again. Hello.
Thank you for letting me ask a question again. I was actually wondering, with the upcoming developments in AI and deepfakes and other stuff like that's new technology, do you see any difference in new cases or new trends in gender-based violence in relation to that, actually? And I don't know who to ask this question to both of you may answer. Thank you.
I think since Nabila have talked a lot, I think Amir, why not you start off first? Yeah.
Roger that, Tuck. we give Nabila some time to rest, okay? But in the past, right? For example, just a simple case of domestic violence. In the past, perpetrators would be asking friends to find out where the former partner could be hiding. Like for example, if the survivor has been rescued or being home in a shelter, trying to track. Nowadays, and this is a real case handled by WO, we have seen perpetrators use tracking devices placed under vehicles, so to track a survivor. So this is I think one of the evidences or cases of how technology is in fact influencing like new topologies of gender-based violence. So, like for example, in the past, yes, it's dissemination of non-consensual images. Now you can doctor those images and in the form of into various ways, and of course there are doctors' videos now that look so authentic with the assistance or the enabling of such technology by AI or deepfake, right? How, like for example, it is a epidemic now in South Korea, how they are struggling so much with it. So we do see a trend where technology is in fact showing us new forms of gender-based violence, but at the heart of it is still the same. Women, a person's gender is being targeted, meaning the phenomena happens because of that person's gender. So that person wouldn't be in a deepfake video if not for that person's gender, for example. So it's none other than her or that person's gender. So at the heart of it is still the same, but technology is influencing much more scarier ways of violence. Yeah.
Thank you for the insightful answer.
Nabila, your turn.
No, actually, we have had rising cases in women making police reports. We have had 2 recently, right, that were really high profile in Malaysia. People they are quite like either they are content creators or they have some kind of a high profile because of their job or they are a spokesperson for a certain brand. Their images are being used are misused to create porn. So a lot of them are using a loophole that says, oh, but this image is not exactly you, it's just a likeness of you. So there are loopholes so then they're like, okay, but it's not really you. So they change the photo, like, so they take that person's likeness, so they photo, but then they might change like their eyebrow, or they change their nose a little bit, or they change certain features of their eyes, like their eye color. So then that's not really you, but still it's their likeness. And then then at the end of the day, we have the question of, okay, then who owns that? Do you own your image or not? right? And what is avenue for justice for them? That's still under debate. Obviously, we don't have a strong enough discourse yet in Malaysia to even open that conversation. It's starting because of all the cases that are, but the cases are not as many to be able to create a stronger discourse.
Thank you so much.
Nabila. Thank you, Nabila. We have one question from the chat, Liane. Like, I don't know if you want to actually also, turn on your camera and actually ask the panelists yourself. Otherwise, I'll just list out the question. Okay, well, I'm just gonna list out the question. Well, there's this one of the audience, Liane. She asked, what is the predominant age range for OGBV cases? So perhaps Nabila, you would like to answer that. What are the predominant age range for OGBV cases?
We have a wide range. So we have it depends on the type of OGBV that you're talking about. So cyber harassment, the most common is actually 25 to 40. But we also see a lot of cases where they are underage minors. So we see a lot of cyber harassment also between, it starts as young as 10. We have had parents call us or try to seek help from between the age of 10 to 18. And also their images being used from the age of 12 onwards. But I would say the most common is between 18 to 40, maybe. That's the most common. But that's the one that we have cases for. We don't really have data for the things. It's still very much a struggle to even get survivors and victims to trust us, especially if they are friends who are the ones that tell us, okay, I have a friend who's going through this, and then they come and contact us, and then they are really scared because they are scared of being found out. And so even though we say, okay, don't worry, we don't release your names, we don't even keep your names in our database. If you tell us you don't want to be public, if you don't want to take it further, this is only purely for research and documentation, and we want to be able to give you support, point you to the right places. Moving past that first barrier has been a huge struggle for our office.
Nabila, actually, also I want to follow up, like you mentioned, like since the question is about the victims, the survivors themselves being like around this age, like, I'm actually also curious, like also bouncing off what Misha previously asked about AI and tech savvy and everything. Given how also nowadays, like youth are becoming more and more tech savvy, do you also notice a trend in the perpetrators of OGBV becoming more and more younger?
Yes, so sometimes the perpetrators are within the age range. So we have had cases where parents call us like, but what can I do? Because the other party is also a minor, right? Because we have had, some of them are like 12 years old, and then they have friends who are 14 years old, or so a lot of the perpetrators are also underage minors that we see. It may not, there are cases, of course, where they're like the child is 15 years old, where the girl is 15, and then the perpetrator is 30 years old and trying to talk to her, right? But we have a lot of those cases are also like 15-year-old doing it to other 15-year-olds. And so this is where also like child rights advocates roles come into play, where they probably need to have a stronger role in advocating for child's rights, what not to do, because we have also had like other children being traumatized because like parents are trying to get the other party's parents to be responsible, and then the police are not sure of what to do, things like that. So there are a lot of like sensitivity around those kind of cases that we may not necessarily be well placed. KRYSS Network may not be well placed to provide support in that sense, and then we try to get our child rights advocates colleagues to come and help. I'm sure WAO has had, I'm not sure, maybe you guys have had the same cases. We have not worked together under minor cases.
Yeah, I think it's a similar practice like what Nabila described. So even at WO, although we do because sometimes our cases comes with child survivors as well, who either witness the violence or they are themselves unfortunate survivors, right? So, let's say like the case involves about child protection issues per se, we do would link up with our colleagues in the child protection scene, meaning that because they have the better resources and expertise in um, um, working the case. So at the end of the day, it's also about a resource issue, meaning that how these things usually would be handled in such a way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Amir. I would like to also invite other audience member to actually also ask more questions. Is there anyone who is interested? Oh, I guess we have a new favorite audience. Yes, Michelle.
Only if it's okay for you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. This question might be a little bit off topic, so do tell me if it is. As someone from Europe, I was actually wondering, do you see differences in the way this is treated, like in comparison to, for example, Europe or other main parts of the world? Or if it's off topic, just let me know. It's fine.
Misha, are you asking about how OGBV like survivors are being treated?
No, just the whole issue in general. Like, how do people even like? What is the main view
Got it.
of
Like
people
on all
around the
levels,
world?
lah,
Yes,
basically.
yes.
Okay. Amir, would you like to take it?
Again, this is from my limited knowledge on the topic, but we do see geographical differences when it comes to the prevalence of OGBV, in the sense that, like for example, right, here in Malaysia, WhatsApp is one of the most used app here for communication, but it may not be in South Korea or Japan or China. So you get to see some platforms being being the main site for you see OGBV is occurring rampantly. You can see, like for example, in Malaysia, there is a trend in Tumblr. So like in Tumblr, right, there's a lot of blog sites that do we still use the word blog? So I'm not sure. So we still have this Tumblr pages that dedicates itself to posting non-consensual images, not just people. Let's say you will find a lot among celebrities, but you do also people, perpetrators, capturing images, you see, from in the public and posting them on Tumblr, and then there's a specific dedicated pages. But this may not be the case, let's say, if you go into other jurisdictions or in a country. So I think there are common local behaviors when it comes to OGBV. So, but Nabila would know better. Yeah, I defer to her.
Thanks, Amir. The Economist Intelligence Unit did a global survey, and it found that somehow the awareness of online gender-based violence in the global south are much lower. Maybe because of the kind of, I don't want to keep saying like, oh, the West is better than the East, because that's not necessarily true, right? But unfortunately, the sensitization of the authorities are much better in the global north than it is in the global south, where they have poured more resources on sensitization issues. So the likeliness of a survivor to be believed in Canada, for example, is much higher than a survivor in Nigeria, right? But having said that, the survivors themselves having the courage to be able to speak up is, I think, pretty much the same globally. So it might be that even in societies where sensitization and resources are higher for online gender-based violence or technology facilitated gender-based violence, the prevalence and the inability of the survivors to be able to deal with it themselves, I think, are same across the board. If you go to the Economist website, they have this huge, amazing global statistics on online gender-based violence globally. And I think they interviewed women across 61 countries, between 500 to 1,000 women. And you would see that the numbers don't differ so much.
Thank you so much. That gives me a lot of insight. Oh, sorry,
No worries, Michelle. Thank you, Nabila. I just like to also quickly follow up. Since you mentioned about how, what's it called, there are less, not much resources being pulled to make sure the police are more sensitized, right? Do you foresee in Malaysia, is there a trend where ministers, perhaps, of the government have actually indicated that they are going to focus on this, or it's completely worst off now?
No, I think credit to the government after the case of the content creator that committed suicide last year. There was a lot of hype and a lot of attention given to the issue, but not necessarily labeled as online gender-based violence. So it was only focused on one type of online gender-based violence, which is cyber harassment or cyberbullying. That only covers one part of it. And then the Malaysian government then came up with the Online Safety Act, which is meant to address this issue and strengthen our legal framework, including provisions into the penal code. However, the laws are also very broad and vague, and that also poses a risk on infringing our larger freedom of expression. So yes, they are doing something, but not so much into desensitization of the authorities, more on strengthening the laws. And like I said earlier in the conversation, where I don't think that resources should be poured all into that. I think there should be a balance. And yeah, so far they have only shown interest in that side of things. And then whenever people start talking about gender disinformation and other forms on online gender-based violence, those are not taken as seriously and are not addressed in a concrete way that they should be.
Actually, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, okay. Putting resources to make sure. Got it. That's actually really interesting. Would you like to also supplement Nabila's answer?
By the way, I saw Cheryl trying to raise her hand. You're trying to ask a question, Cheryl? Is it okay if we allow Cheryl's question
Yes,
first?
will do.
Sorry, Amir. The question I wanted to ask is also in regards to authority and to the police, because they're usually the first people that we think of reaching out to, especially for people who have been through OGBV. So the question that I have is just, I'm curious if the police doesn't take the victim seriously when they come to them saying like, hey, I've been harassed, I've been stalked online, I have my pictures there. And is that like breach of the duty that the police owes to the victim? Is there any actions we can take against the police so that they would take this matter sort of seriously instead of like pushing it aside? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Yeah, this is very important to note. So number one, never be deterred, because number one is that this is the state's responsibility. It is the responsibility of the police to as a form of service to the citizens, to the people, that they are tasked with with regards to the protection for public protection, right? So yes, they could be problematic civil servants or problematic officers within the system, but do not be deterred. So that's the message that we always try to convey, that that we must put them into account. We must put them being responsible in discharging those duties. But yes, it is a breach. So normally, for example, what we would usually do as part of practice is an offense relating to GBV, including online GBV. Usually, we will alert our counterparts in the D11 unit, where it's a unit specializes in children, women, and sexual crimes. So meaning that they are alerted by cases or incidents where the officers are, or the investigating officers are not cooperative, not taking the issue lightly. Again, these are steps suggested to take, but again, even when you take these steps, you would still encounter problems along the way. But the idea is that these are one of the steps that you can take. Number two is alerting the integrity department at Bukit Aman. So that's also one of the things that we need to do. We need to alert the top brass when it comes to how to say, when we encountered uniform personnel who are basically neglecting the duty. So basically at WO, this is what we would be doing, because we have a specific department handling advocacy. So usually we would collect all of these how to say, challenges from the field, from our social workers, and we would highlight them to our counterparts in the government, so that they are aware of such situations and actions can be taken. So that's just an experience from WO. Any comments from KRYSS?
Hi, thanks, Amir. So I think that's a very wonderful question because I do think there needs to be more accountability by the police as well as MCMC. Unfortunately, I want to say that there are avenues, right? Because actually, if you want to complain about a certain officer that you don't think that is taking your case seriously, actually you can. I have done it before myself for a totally unrelated to an OGBV case. But unfortunately, there also isn't a lot, awareness on their rights of the common lay people. And also sometimes the system kind of crushes you and your will when you want to kind of pursue your rights because you feel like you are being defeated by the system. So there are people who do speak up against the injustice that they face by the police, but then the system kinds of give backlash towards them, saying, "Oh, this is not the way that you should be doing," and then people lose their will to pursue that, right? Because it can be very harsh when you are trying to stand up for yourself and the whole world is you feel like the weight of the whole world is coming down on you and you are so alone. Or if you're just you and your lawyer, some people want to have a lawyer but they don't even know that a lawyer can help them, or they think that a lawyer is too expensive to engage and therefore they give up. But yeah, to answer the question shortly, yes, you can speak out against the injustice that you face against the authorities. But the other question is whether you have the will to go all the way. If you would be a whistleblower and say, okay, this is what I have experienced, and then I have gathered like other people who have experienced the same thing, right? But not everybody has that. I'm not sure myself, after years and years of experience and 20 years of working in this field, that I have the same amount of resilience that I do before, you know. So it's very, very difficult. But yes, the short answer is yes, you can report the authorities. But the long, complicated answer is I don't know how strong some people are. I'm not saying to give up. I'm saying that unfortunately that is the reality. That people just lose their will or give up halfway. We have had survivors for years trying to get justice for themselves, and after 3 to 4 years, because the system just breaks them, they give up, and now they don't even want to seek help anymore, and they're only seeking help from the therapists or the psychologists or the counselors that they have found the click with, right? Because even like I said before, finding a counselor that understands you is a journey and is a commitment in itself. But yeah, unfortunately, this is the sad reality of seeking justice on any form of online gender-based violence or real life gender-based violence.
Okay, thank you, Nabila. Actually, you mentioned something. Thank you. I hope Cheryl this answer your question. One thing you mentioned about was that there's a lot of survivors, they didn't even know, or they don't have access either to legal assistance or legal representation, and they're not aware, or either they can't afford it. Amir, like in your line of work, given like in WOW's capacity and everything, or maybe even beyond that, do you actually also liaise or collaborate with lawyers or any form of like legal personnel when in terms of like handling the cases for all these people who are survivors who are facing OGBV or just normal abuse also?
Yeah, so unfortunately, because of resource challenges, right, we do not have our own set of legal hawks to any day take on cases and fight the state. So, so what we do is that we would link up our survivors with resource persons that could help with their case. Like in the sense, like for example, if the person has resources to take on a lawyer, then we would refer her or that person to a lawyer that specializes in the area, or let's say the person does not have such resources, then we would assist her with, like for example, getting help from legal aid. So again, just highlighting that support service. So essentially, when it comes to the legal matters or the legal needs of our survivors, because of resources, unfortunately, we do not have our own legal team to handle them. But we would like to. So but that's the thing, yeah.
Maybe I can actually convince MCC Asia to also help out in this area.
I love that idea.
But one thing to know, like you also mentioned about giving support services, etc. Right? So we have one of our lovely audience here, Firdaus. So Firdaus Husdi, who asked, what should school counselors be mindful of when handling OGBV cases? So like, I mean, I'm assuming she's asking like, is there any difference between OGBV and like normal gender-based violence and other forms of like domestic abuse, etc.?
Nabila, is that okay? I'm also interested to know your insight in that. Yeah, firstly.
Was that towards Nabila or was that towards Firdaus?
No. Oh, I think Amir was asking you, Nabila, like, what is your insight on it?
Because
Firdaus is
Firdaus
asking-
asked the question, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Firdaus asked the question. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. What was the question again?
The question was, what should school counselors be mindful of when handling OGBV issues? So from that question alone, I'm assuming it's about like differences in OGBV and normal GBV and like other forms of like domestic abuses, etc. Is there anything special?
Yeah, so a lot of the school counselors we have not dealt with school counselors in our cases. We've only dealt with one, and that was a school counselor that really, for me, I really applaud her. She has gone above and beyond. I have never met a school counselor who I think is doing much more than the parent, or basically the parent was too busy, who couldn't understand the struggles of the minor, so it has left it to the school counselor. But that is a very rare case. Usually a lot of the times the survivors or victims themselves are very, very scared, or because they are scarred by the school counselors themselves. And the number one thing is the sensitivity. The one is sensitivity, and also the confidentiality, because I think a lot of the times they take for granted the feeling of the survivors or the victims to be able to speak up, right? So whenever the victims or survivors open up, they immediately want to do some stuff or find out things very, very rushed, and then they end up scaring the survivors, because the survivors are like, oh my god, what are you doing right now? Are you going to tell people my story? So I think there is a lot of need for sensitivity and gentleness with the survivors, because it's hard enough for them to even find somebody to talk to. And then I think, like I said, like the victim blaming culture is like, oh, the first thing is like, oh, what did you do? Right? I think the first thing is that. And then second thing is also to know that, to probably guide the parents in a roundabout way, and asking the victims and survivors what they would feel most comfortable with, right? Because there are also cases where the counselors then told us, the parents, and then the parents immediately, let's go make a police report, and then blow it out of proportion when the victims or survivors themselves would like a more gentle approach or behind the scene approach, right? To solve the situation instead of having a very confrontational way. And there's usually counselors just take over as the adult and then speak directly to the parents and then ignoring the voice and the feelings of the victims and survivors themselves. Usually that is what we see, that is the pattern and trend that we see in the cases that we have managed when school counselors are involved.
Thank you, Nabila. But do you think, because since you mentioned there's only one specific case, do you think it's mostly just because of this specific counselor who's a bit uh, inept in terms of handling OGBV cases, or do you think it's just in terms of like all school counselors or most school counselors in Malaysia are a bit more under trained in this aspect?
Yeah, so no, it was the one case that the counselor was really, really good.
Mm.
It
Oh.
was, yeah, we have around 8 cases that I think involve school counselors, but out of the 8, I think only one that I have seen so far in all of the case studies that we developed that has done really well, that they go above and beyond. Most of the time it's the other way around, where they don't make the victims or survivors feel safe. So I think the first thing is that, yeah, probably they need more training, because a lot of the times they feel this responsibility to immediately protect the victims and survivors, right? Without understanding that, yeah, the survivors have their own agency to speak up as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't go and seek help, Yeah. And we have seen cases where then the issues are, I don't want to say blown out of proportion, but have made the victims and survivors felt very, very uncomfortable because they feel like it was blown out of proportion. They felt like they would have preferred a more gentler solution.
Okay, Amir, like you raised your hand. Oh, you're muted.
Thanks, Tak. So we've also seen these instances from the field where we had children sharing with us that they actually do not trust their school counselors because again this is not to generalize that all counselors are in that way. Similarly, with regards to other stakeholders, but here it was an issue that they do not trust them because they have seen repeatedly how confidential sharings with the counselors are known to other people within the school. So I think that's severely problematic because if 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 let's say going to the counselors is out of the option, where else can children go? So meaning, like, let's say if you are not aware of other resources, right? So I think I just want to highlight the importance of a good colleague of mine raised this actually when we discussed about this issue about rights-based training for people who work with children, because I think what my colleague shared was that there is a culture that we do not, how to say, respect children enough to consider that they are rights holders. You see, that they have rights and we mustn't violate them. So if I can use Malay, ini kanak-kanak and they are children, so why bother? So yeah. So just want to highlight that. Yeah.
Thank you, Amir. All right. Now we'll move on to other questions. Are there any other questions from the audience? This is your opportunity to actually ask. Yes, Singler.
Hi, I just want to ask if there's any, like, how do you navigate cases where it's a trans woman or, sorry, can you hear me? Okay, where there's trans woman or this person is part of the LGBTQ community and they are being outed by this sort of harassment or doxing. How do you navigate cases like that?
Thank you, Singler. I repeat the question in case no one actually heard it. Singler asks if someone who is part of the LGBT community, like they are being outed in terms of as part of the OGBV targeting, what can they do per se? So I think this one we'll leave it to Nabila. Nabila, would you like to take the floor?
Yeah, so usually the kind of assistance that we provide to the LGBT community is to provide communications with the platforms. so that the platform are aware that there are elements of hate speech, there are elements of violence that are being perpetrated in their community members or by their community members to other community members. So the first step is, if they come to us, the first step is we would ask them like, okay, what would you like done? Would you like the content to be taken down? And then, of course, also we would suggest therapies. But the first step is actually platform accountability. We help them in their journey to get support. So we have a partnership with TikTok, for example, on community support, where they partner with NGOs that know, because a lot of NGOs get and CSOs get the first-hand report from community members, right? Not knowing where to go to the platform themselves. So we have a new partnership with TikTok, but TikTok is the one that initiated this. We don't have the same kind of partnership with Instagram, Facebook, for example. But yeah, so the first thing is we would ask if they would like platform accountability and help for the content to be taken down. And then we ask what are their other needs, whether it be peer-to-peer support, peer-to-peer counseling. We ask whether they would like additional counseling from therapists, and also referring them to LGBTIQ friendly therapists and psychologists, because again, it may not be that all counselors are friendly to LGBTIQ community members. Yeah, so that's the level of support that we give. Some of them do want to report to MCMC. We have had a content creator ask us what are their options with MCMC, and again, it boils down to their sensitivity issue as well. When it's to do with trans women or trans men, they are not so friendly. And this may be a deterrent, of course, for people to speak out. But there are community members who tell us, no, I want to at least put up a report. Whether MCMC accepts it or not is another issue, but we want help to speak to MCMC. How do we do that? Then yeah, so we help them lodge a report, and then the follow-up also, we try to help them. Sometimes it's futile, but at least the principle that it is being reported, that something is being done, at least we are encouraging and empowering people to be able to stand up for themselves. I'm sorry that this answer is maybe a bleak answer. It's not necessarily a one that
Yeah,
is
it's a
very
good
hopeful.
answer. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
It's a difficult question to answer considering how Malaysia has a lot of issues. I think tackling OGBV is one thing, LGBT rights is another issue. So yeah, it's a difficult. But thank you. Actually, there's my next question is actually from Kelly. Kelly asked, but I think I want to direct it to Amir. So Kelly asks, what should parents do if their child disclose experiencing online violence issue with a circle of friends when relationship turns sour and requested to transfer school? I'm assuming because your area of work, like you probably have at least some children who have faced abuse. In this case, what would you suggest? What would you advise, Amir?
Oh, sorry, I'm muted. Yeah. So what should parents do their children disclose experiencing online gender-based violence with a circle of friends and the relationship turns sour? So when it comes to children, right, there's something called the best interest determination. So when we work with children, we must often go back to this principle. So what would be in the best interest of the children? Because for children, there are other considerations versus cases that is, let's say, for example, concerns adults. Again, this is me trying to answer from another perspective. So because fundamentally it's all about that children's best interest. So let's say it is in the best interest of the children to, for example, be moved, things like that, then that's the course of action that needs to be taken. But again, you need more information than just that. So there's also a lot of stakeholder that should be involved when it comes to child protection, especially when it comes to schools. So for example, we want to know whether it's systematic at the school. There's a pattern involved. Are there any other survivors? You see, so let's say if best practices is that, again, it must be approached within the framework of the rights of the child. So what are the rights of the child, and what would be the best interest determination for that particular child's case in the pursuance of an action. So usually when there are child protection issues, right, concerning children, so that's actually the first principle we need to take. Although case by case is different, but we always have to ask ourselves, center ourselves with that framework first. What would be the best interest of the child? So let's say if the child, so let's say parents don't want, you say let's punish the children or things like that. But if that action actually further harms the children in question, then that might not be the best course of action. So that's why I think questions like this, we will always try to refer a survivor or complainants to a child protection organizations. But fundamentally, I think the you would understand the reasoning behind child protection work is that what would be the best interest determination of the child. So but practically, maybe Nabila, are there any cases? Have you dealt with such cases before?
Yeah. So we have dealt with minor cases. There is no right or wrong answer to this, right? Because a lot of parents, obviously the thing is they want to be able to find a solution, but and it's a very, we as a, I think overall has a very kind of like a protectionist mindset where we must protect. Sorry, I think there was another question that I was yeah. So we have a very protectionist mindset where we're like, oh, okay, we want to be able to protect the child, right? But sometimes, like we say, it's also not in the best interest of this child, and sometimes if the perpetrator is another child. Of course, if the perpetrator, it's all context. If the perpetrator is an adult, then of course there are elements that are alarming. But sometimes the element, the concerns are, it's concerning another child. So I would say the advice to parents is really to just take it on a case by case basis, and then see how comfortable the child is when speaking up, because sometimes when they go about it the wrong way, the child then ends up shutting down. And we have had cases where the parents come to us, and then we have spoken to one counselor, and that child opened up, and then the parent somehow said something or did something to scare the child, and then the child end up shutting down and then not talking for another 2 months. And then in that 2 months obviously opens them up to risk of experiencing more violence, right? I would say be a little bit more aware of how the child may want to be comfortable with. It's the same, I think it's the same approach as well as the school counselor, except from the parental perspective, because a lot of the times I understand as a parent, you want to be able to protect your child and say, oh, okay, but children are smart. They're not so, they may not necessarily need so much protection as we want to be able to give to them, let's say.
Understood. So, but in the case where, just to follow up, because Angelina also asked a very interesting question. So, like how we want children to actually speak up and disclose the issue. But what if a child disclosed that she was sexually abused by her own family member, but the issue is the child has no legal document? So I'm assuming it's talking about your rights as a citizen in this country. Would it affect differently? I'm gonna direct this question to Nabila first, I guess. If Nabila, if you're comfortable. Sorry, I'm asking so many questions.
So I'm not so sure this has to do with online gender-based violence, but more on the issue of statelessness and violence in general. But actually, we have received data and cases where they are undocumented. So when we went to Sabah to do our roadshow on online gender-based violence and town hall, there are also a lot of requests for support from undocumented community members, but they're not children. And they say, like, they are having also issues to gain access to justice. But there are people who are dealing with statelessness issues that are able to help them lodge a report and provide the necessary assistance should they hit a roadblock with the authorities, if the authorities are not being cooperative. So because we were in Sabah and we were lucky enough to have connections to refer the stateless people to the right partners in assisting them, because we help more in like the platform accountability, and making sure how they understand their rights, referring them to the right people, documenting their cases, but the actual pathway of referrals need to be to the right people. And I would say, like, in this case, it would be to first probably to refer to stateless people who deal with statelessness.
Thank you, Nabila. Actually, I'm also curious, Amir, does WOW ever come in contact with also people without legal documents and then like facing abuse and etc.?
Oh, yes. So our services are not just exclusive for Malaysians. They are open to women, and we also strive to be sex positive as well with gender minorities who identify as a woman. So in the sense that we do have considerable experience when managing cases that involves individuals that do not have legal documentations per se. So our social workers would work with the relevant stakeholders in advocating for that particular case. But I think here we need to highlight that not having legal status does not preclude the survivor of the person's rights when it comes to sexual crimes. So that needs to be highlighted here. So as legally speaking, sexual crimes here is viewed in a way that there mustn't be impunity. So even if that person does not have any legal documentation, the person should be able to access rights. But I understand perfectly that not having legal documentation is a deterrent. So that's why I think in this such a situations, like what Nabila said, is the part referring to the specialized stakeholders that would be able to advocate for the cases.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and obviously we have one more question from Aina Amin. She asks, what is the best approach when an individual is openly being abusive, i.e. tweeting about it and etc. on social media platform? So, and they're targeting women in general. Other than speaking up about it, what else can we do? I think this one we can redirect it to Nabila.
So we would usually advise people to report, but report in like organized reporting in numbers, because when there's a higher number of reports on one specific person, it's more likely that that the issue is addressed by the platform. So in this case, it's really about platform accountability, and knowing, like, reporting and knowing that the guidelines of the community are being breached. Also, you need to see if there are elements of hate speech and where it's being taken. Like in some countries, hate speech is punishable by law. So if it's here, unfortunately, our hate speech law is not very strong. But still, you can report it. You can report behaviors. When you say tweeting about ways to conduct femicide, that is a form of violence and targeting women. So it's a form of hate speech. But if it's in Malaysia, again, it's the first thing is organizing a mass reporting on that person's post, so that person's post can be taken down and that person can be blocked on the platform. Of course, it's not a solution because that person can easily, I understand, create a new profile and resurface, but it's a mitigation method at least.
Thank you, Nabila. That's actually really interesting. Do you have any final remark?
Actually, I have a very interesting, actually, I have a question because suddenly it came to my mind because I'm curious to know what would Nabila think of vigilante justice, you see, like when it comes to OGBV and the ethics of viraling, like for example, an OGBV issue for the sake of bringing the perpetrator to justice. So yeah, your thoughts and experiences. That's something that like suddenly it burns in my mind, you know.
I understand, but what do you mean by vigilante justice? Because vigilante justice would mean then you are asking for harm against the perpetrator, right? But reporting them and asking them to be like shut down from the platform is not vigilante justice, no? Because okay, so I think that we need to have like a draw boundary here. So for me, vigilante justice, if it's not okay if we are advocating for harm to be perpetrated against the person, but it is okay if we are organizing for that person to be shut down, right? Because reporting them to the individuals, reporting them to the platform is okay. So we have had cases where there a guy who is suspected of being a pedophile, and community basically got together to then report him. But what is not okay, of course, is to like then organize an attack against that person. I would never in any way condone attacks or even cyber harassment of the perpetrator. What I would say is, yeah, just organize for mass reporting to the platform for the content to be taken down, but not for for then be the perpetrator of cyber harassment against that person. Sorry if I was unclear earlier.
Got it. So what kind of vigilantism, no OGBV to fight OGBV. Thank you, Nabila. Thank you, Amir. That was a good discussion. Thank you for your thoughtful insights and your questions and everything. And to all the audience, thank you for your questions. But if we didn't get to your questions today, feel free to actually reach out after the event. So you can engage with the panelists through their respective organization or by just emailing MC Sesha. We'll probably redirect you to KRYSS Network and WOW. So I want to wrap up today's discussion, and I want to sincerely thank you, our panelists, for sharing their expertise and their experiences, and all of you for being part of this important conversation. So online gender-based violence is a growing issue and will forever be an issue until we actually take steps to actually address it. So it's through awareness, advocacy, and action that we can actually create digital safe space for everyone. So before I do completely end it, I would actually also like to ask everyone to actually turn on their cameras if you are willing. I'm gonna take just a screenshot, a photography session, so that we're gonna commemorate the panel discussion. Right. In 3, 2, you ready? In 3, 2, 1. Thank you. Right. And I encourage everyone to continue to push this discussion beyond just, whatever we have discussed so far, beyond the confines of this panel discussion. I want everyone to actually utilize it and actually, whether it be like supporting survivors, whether it be raising awareness, pushing for stronger policies, or simply just be more mindful of the things we say, making jokes, etc., all these things. But every step is every changes start with awareness, but it must be also followed by action. So before you leave, I also appreciate your feedback. My colleagues here will be posting the link to the feedback form. I appreciate your feedback, on how we can actually improve on this panel discussion, on future events, etc. I mean, for those who have already left, I also have sent an email to you guys, so don't worry. As my colleagues, I will put the link into I will also share my screen. Right, so feel free to actually scan the QR code also if you want to access the feedback form or the link that my colleague will actually put it in the chat. And if you're interested in further collaboration or further inquiries from the organizations, MC Sesha, WOW, or KRYSS Network, feel free to actually connect with the panelists and reach out. Once again, thank you for being here today. Let's keep this conversation going just beyond this confines of this room. Have a great evening and thank you. Stay safe online. All right. Thank you, everyone. Okay. I think that's it. That's it. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.